We're going to get started here in a second, but before we do, I just wanted to bring up a quick thing. We have a lot of things that are going to be going on. Things in the church are getting a lot more active. We have a lot more activities this week. We're going to have, we always have our prayer call. It's something that is a really, really rewarding thing. That happens on Wednesdays. Also, this Wednesday, we're going to have another kids' church. And then on Friday, we're going to have this, kind of conversation that we're calling Starting Points. It's something we want to do once a month, where we're basically opening up different subjects, things that are very topical. This isn't a Bible study. This is something where we want to sit here and just talk about things that, are going on in our society and the world, and basically just kind of approach, like, how do we look at these things as Christians? How do we sit here and maybe see things from a worldly perspective and reconcile that with how we see things? It's really just supposed to be something that's kind of enjoyable. If you're somebody who had that experience where you went to college and you ever had those conversations in the hallway where you just kind of talked about random things, it's a lot like that. So you won't want to miss it. But if you want to know about these events and about other things that are going on, we have a church database, and in here we don't send you a bunch of spam or anything like that. If you're not an email person, that's fine too, because what we can actually do in this database is we can send you out the newsletters and all that, but that have all the announcements. But we can also send out texts, let you know if there's anything happening as a result of weather or anything like that. So I bring all this up to say, if you're not in our database, if you don't get our emails, and again, it's not a ton, we don't spam you, and you don't get any of our texts or anything, please consider giving some of that to your home church host, and we can get you into the database, and that way we can just make certain that you're able to take advantage of some of these opportunities that we have. So with that, I'll go ahead and cut this off. Thank you so much for being here, and let's go ahead and get into today's lesson. In my first year of giving sermons, I talked a lot about what it meant to actually be a Christian and what it meant to have a real relationship and actually have a commitment to this new life that we've all been given through Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross. Well, whenever I do that, my mind always seems to go back to this one story that you're going to read in the book of Joshua. You're going to read it as a group. And basically what you're going to see in here is this phrase that just resonates in my mind. And it's, choose this day who you will serve. And then later on, as for me and my house, I will choose the Lord. This idea of commitment is really important, especially when you consider that oftentimes when we see commitments in the Bible, they actually seem to occur after people have seen the blessings and have had experiences with God or with Jesus Christ. It's after that they see who God is, they understand who God is, and then they commit to having a new life that's now fundamentally changed and now oriented towards what this God is going to have them do. This is something that as Christians, we should resonate with directly, because Christ asks us to accept this gift. He freely offers it. He already did all the hard work, but he's just asking us, saying, I want you to accept this new identity that I've given you, not to be the same person you were before, but to be something new, to be something different. And as a result of this, you start to look at things differently. You start to approach situations differently. And we'll get more into that. But for right now, I want you guys to read the story of Joshua and then think about what commitment means to you. How does commitment cause you to think about something differently, or to actually act differently, approach situations differently, or maybe see yourself differently? When we commit to a life with Christ, we're committing to something that is pretty different. I mean, when you look across the Bible, individuals who commit to a life of Christ or a life following God are really basically saying that I am going to be set apart. I'm going to be something that is different than everything else around me. I think if you were to boil down what it means to commit to God, it could really be summed up as just that. You're setting yourself apart. You're basically saying, I'm going to allow the things of God to identify who I am and what my purpose is, and not everything else around me. You see this symbolism taking place throughout a lot of the epistles that are in the New Testament, these letters that Paul and the other apostles write, where people basically describe the earth as not our home, that this isn't the place that we yearn for. We're yearning for something else. We want something more. You're going to dig into the Bible a little bit and do a couple examples of where this takes place. But I mean, what I'm hoping that you're going to be able to take away from this is the fact that there is something more than just what we can touch. There's something more than we can sense. And when we start living for that world that we know is beyond the here and now, it's amazing what we can accomplish. It's amazing what we can do through Christ working in our lives for something that is much bigger than this fallen, flawed, physical world that surrounds us. I've always loved that part of Hebrews where Paul starts going through and he starts explaining that by faith Abel was able to do this, by faith Abraham was able to do this, by faith Sarah was able to do this. It really highlights how the limitations we place on ourselves just kind of melt away as soon as we're looking past the physical world. Because the physical world wants to say, you can't do that because it's not acceptable. You can't do that because you're a limited individual. You can't do that because you're going to burn out. That's the thing I hear all the time. You can't do that because of whatever it is that the world wants to tell you is a limitation or a problem or a value that they don't agree with. But with God, he says that, those limits don't matter. Those are just limits that the world wants to place on you because they don't understand, or because they think that their energy, that their capability is where everything starts and where everything stops. But we know that there's something more. We know that there is something eternal. We know that there is this God who is capable of anything and all things, and as a result of that God, we're not limited by the things that are around us. That's that fundamentally changed outlook on life that we have because we have a relationship with Jesus Christ, because we have committed to a life that is focused on God. So that being said, what do we do with this? I mean, it's one thing to know that we have a commitment to Christ, but it's another thing to actually live that out. It's another thing to actually, seal that in our hearts. And that's that phrase that I want to focus on here. In the Jewish faith, there's this idea of sealing your heart, of kind of getting yourself right and putting yourself in the right place mentally and spiritually, and then sealing your heart. And oftentimes we do that through actions, through, rituals, for lack of a better phrase, through doing. It's no different than when you're in school and you have a professor or a teacher, tell you everything, but then you don't truly understand it until you physically do something, and that just makes it click, right? Well, this is what baptism does. Baptism is a way that we can physically experience and we can physically live out this commitment that we've made in our minds and our hearts. I want you guys to read the story of Jesus' baptism, mainly because it's really interesting how it differs from a lot of the rhetoric we typically hear surrounding the subject of baptism. Typically, we hear people say it's a public profession of your faith, or it's washing away your sins. But the reality is that neither one of those are something Jesus had to do. I mean, he didn't have to publicly profess his faith to himself. He didn't have to wash away the sins he didn't have. But what Jesus did do was demonstrate the commitment that he was making to his purpose. Think about that for a second. After he gets baptized, and you'll read this, I'm spoiling the end if you hadn't read it before, there's this moment where, the heavens open up and there's this profession of the fact that this is my son, where, God the Father acknowledges who he is and what his purpose is. Well, we have to do the exact same thing. We have to acknowledge ourselves what our purpose is when we commit our lives to Christ. But then we also want others to understand that we are committing our lives to Christ, that we are acknowledging and that we are going to follow this calling that God has placed on every single one of us. Baptism is just a symbol, but it's a symbol that helps to seal in our hearts and in our minds a decision that maybe we already made personally and we already made quietly. Now we can live out that commitment in a very open and very public way. baptism is something that throughout my own personal walk with Christ, I've struggled with a little bit. And I don't say that because I haven't gotten baptized. It's actually been quite the opposite. I was baptized as an infant, and then once I got a little bit older, I kind of owned that baptism through confirmation, which is really all it is just owning your own baptism, just without water. But then I had to get baptized because I became a part of a church that said you can't become a part of our church unless you're baptized. So I did that kind of under duress, but that didn't mean anything to me. Once I became a young adult, I kind of hit this moment where I started understanding it a little bit more. And it was because when I became a young adult, I hit this point where I realized that I wanted to live for more than myself. I wanted to live for more than just what I was capable of doing, because no matter how hard I worked, how much energy I had, how many talents or skills I developed, no matter how many opportunities I had in this world, I would never be able to achieve enough to be good enough to earn my way into heaven. I would never be able to achieve enough to probably be fully happy and to think, I'm better than anybody else in this one area. I was never going to be satisfied. I had that God-sized hole in my heart that I needed to fill with something, and the only thing that was going to fit would be God. Well, if I'm going to do that, then I have to change my perspective. I have to commit to a purpose that's bigger than myself and bigger than this world, and I need to live that out. I need to somehow seal that, demonstrate it, to do some physical action so that I would never forget it. And so I was baptized again. I've been baptized. The joke that the pastor gave at the time that I got baptized right then was, we're going to hold your head under the water for a few more seconds and make certain it sticks this time. Well, I can promise you I'm not going to do anything like that, but I would say this. I think every individual should ask themselves if they have ever done that sealing in their hearts. If you've made a commitment to Jesus Christ, if you sat here and said, I acknowledge this is my purpose, I acknowledge this is why I'm here, that is amazing, and I thank God that you have made that decision. The next step is to seal that, to make it something that you know it and you feel it, but now let's seal it and make that impression. There's another thing that you end up getting out of this action of baptism. That's the fact that, going through these common experiences helps to bind us together. In the same way that you have individuals who end up going through different experiences, camps, workshops, people who go on travel together, people who end up working together, individuals who have things that are like regimental life, military or first responders or whatever. You go through these experiences and it does draw you in closer together because you have done these physical actions or gone through and had these common experiences that mean something to you. They help to identify you. They help to set you apart. Baptism does have the same type of effect. It's something that helps us to identify with God through this demonstration of our commitment, and it draws us closer together as a family. If you've never made that commitment, then I highly encourage you to pray about that, consider it, and please let me know. We're going to be having a baptism service here pretty soon because fortunately one young individual, Maddie Spence, has decided she wanted to follow through and get baptized, and I think that is absolutely amazing. I mean, her testimony itself, just hearing how she spoke about baptism and her own relationship with God definitely blew me away. So that being said, if that's something that you think you'd be interested in doing, I can't encourage it enough. Get baptized. If you've already been baptized, look, I've done it several times. It's never too late to make a recommitment and decide you want to seal that recommitment in your heart. So with that being said, I hope you're able to take something away from this. I hope that the idea of commitment is something that maybe has a little bit more flesh on it, and maybe even you have a little bit better appreciation for what baptism is. But in any event, as we go through the next several weeks, we'll cover more topics like this that you may have heard over and over again in the church, but maybe never truly appreciated the deep and meaningful impact of them. I hope that you'll enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this week, and until we meet again, God bless.